If it's okay with you,
Sure.
I'm gonna pivot to your favorite part of every podcast, which is acknowledging a record that you're on pace to break.
All right. What do we got?
So I told you every time this happens, we're going to address it.
I just want to say something before. I actually don't know what this record is, but somehow it got back to me that me just acknowledging it and just kind of moving forward helps us push through. Whereas like when I do kind of like I don't want to talk about it, explain away, it actually just drags it on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work towards more of that. Just a little heads up.
It's like getting complimented. I've been told this before about how to handle a compliment. Like when someone compliments you, you just say thank you.
Yeah, you just take it and move on, right?
If you try to like downplay it and then it becomes this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a record and then you can just move on.
Okay.
Your feedback has been that you don't like these. So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction this time though. This isn't necessarily a record that we want to celebrate. This is a little different. So I had a couple people send this to me on social media. So shout out to all you guys. You are on pace. There are 3 games left in the regular season. You are on pace to break your own record set last year for fewest offensive rebounds in an NBA season.
Wait, that's got to be like relative to minutes.
I'm not sure. So last year you had 9 offensive rebounds in 72 games. So caveat here is it's a shorter regular season than previous.
Okay, great.
But you had 10. I think you had 10 offensive rebounds last year.
Okay.
This year you've got 6. And there are 3 games left. So
I'm trending the wrong way.
Unless you're somehow pulling out 4 or 5 offensive rebounds in the next 3 games, which if you look at the law of averages, that's certainly not going to happen. Yeah. You're going to break your own record for fewest offensive rebounds in NBA history. Wow. That's history.
That's special.
So look, the same week Russell Westbrook breaks the triple-double record, you're setting one of your own. Congratulations.
I'd like to comment on that.
Okay,
now
good.
That we bring
you
it
can
up.
Acknowledge and move on or comment. That's up to you.
I want to point out that I have a role on our team of being the first one back in transition, which I don't always do entirely. Sometimes I get caught in no man's land. But the same way that it's not my job on offense to post up,
okay,
it's also not my job to crash the offensive glass.
You got to know your role. That's important. Here's a question.
So if you have like the halfback, fullbacks, whatever you want to call it, different coaches use different terminology. It's my job to be like the first line back in transition, which once again, I'm not always right on that either. Sometimes I'm in no man's land,
right.
But my job is when the shot goes up to get back and set our transition.
Get your rim protector back there.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Do you think that you're given that role because of your lack of offensive rebounding? Or is your lack of offensive rebounding a result of the role?
Right. Like if I had like Dennis Rodman ability, they wouldn't be sending me back. I think yes. But my point being is that I could go to the offensive glass every time and get more than 6.
You sure?
I am certain of that. I think a funny thing would be to look at all 6 of my offensive rebounds this year.
You have played and started in all 69 games this year. So you've played in 69 games and have 6 offensive rebounds. I would like to say I am not the guy. We've talked about this before, how there's no one in the NBA I could guard. I am not the type of guy to...
Do you think you could get more than 6?
I think if you put me out on a basketball court...
With your sole purpose?
Not even if it was my sole purpose. I just think the ball would find me 6 times. So in this stat, this was a couple days ago, so this isn't accounting for your last game, I don't think.
But I don't think I had any in my last game.
You didn't. I made sure to check. Okay. But at this point, it said the Heat have missed 1,900 shots with Duncan on the floor, which means 0.003% of them came to you. So what I'm saying is,
those are bad returns.
Just by like random error, that many balls are going to fall into your hands, is what I'm saying.
So you're saying I'm unlucky?
Well, or
what are you saying?
Now you're telling me you're the fullback, so maybe you're not even in the mix.
I'm not even in the mix. That's kind of my point. Is that like, I'm not even in that space. You know, like I'm legitimately already working my way back.
So here's a question for you: if you weren't that guy, if your job was to crash the offensive
what would
rebound,
my numbers look like?
It goes from what, 6 to
I mean, 8? They would still be pretty pedestrian. They certainly wouldn't be anything to write home about. I think they go more than 2. That's underselling me. I think if I actually made a concerted effort, and once again, I want to remind people, I don't not make a concerted effort because I'm lazy or this, that. I don't do it because that's not what I'm supposed to do.
Got to know your role.
That's not my job.
Yes.
You know, the same way somebody shows up to work to an accountant shows up to balance a spreadsheet.
Right. They're not sales.
That's their job. Right.
Correct.
They're not going out on the streets.
Hey, leave the corporate analogies to me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a little in over my head there.
Quick shout out also, just real quick, because you're not going to give me a real answer on that last question. So if we're shouting out the 5 guys who are in the bottom 5.
Yeah, who's my company?
Well, so JJ.
Oh,
JJ has 9. So
maybe it's a podcast thing.
He's second lowest. So you're lowest at 6. JJ's at 9.
So I need 3 in the last 3 games,
right,
to get past JJ. Okay,
correct.
That's honestly reachable.
Just wanted to put that on your
I honestly might do it.
Why don't you walk into the office today or tomorrow? You say, "Hey, Spo, here's the thing."
But here's the deal.
Why don't we give Kendrick the fullback responsibility?
But so it's, first of all, it's Kendrick and myself in that first unit. We both are.
Yeah, so you're not a better option than Jimmy, Trevor.
Exactly. That's my point. But for example, these upcoming games, Philly is really dynamic in transition with Ben Simmons. And of course, Giannis, a huch part of their game is transition.
So maybe
having me back there is important.
Yeah, I get it. Maybe we make a deal with like Trevor. He's like, hey, why don't you get back? You can guard Giannis in transition. I'll try to get more offensive rebounds.
You know what, Dave? I'm just gonna keep showing up every day to work and just trying to do my job to the best of my ability. You know, whatever. I'm a whatever's asked of me type of guy.
All right,
and I plan on continuing being that. But I will say I appreciate the change of pace on the record. It was a nice curveball.
Yeah.
I truthfully I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, I got berated last time I tried to give you some flowers, so I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
Next thing I wanted to ask you about is, did you hear the Bill Burr podcast this week?
I did, because you shared it with me, which, you know, I've had some pretty cool moments in terms of like being acknowledged and ones that like, you know, are kind of like surreal in a sense. I'm a huge Bill Burr fan. I think he's absolutely hilarious, obviously from the Boston area, and is, in my opinion, one of the best comedians out. And just the longevity, first of all. He's been doing it for forever.
Yeah.
And he could talk about legitimately anything, and I think it would be hilarious. I will say, I'll throw this out there as a little caveat. Like anything, like any sort of, you know, comedic art form, there's a line there that he learns to walk. I mean, between like what's funny and maybe what's crossing the line. But I think part of being a really good comedian is like knowing where to be. And on top of that, that's not to say that he hasn't crossed the line at times.
It's kind of a shtick.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that comedy in particular as an art form deserves a little bit more leeway. Just in general.
Agree.
Not saying that they can just go out and say whatever they want, but I do think there's a little bit more. Anyways, that's neither here nor there.
We're all over the place.
Yeah, Bill Burr gave me a little shout out. He's a Celtics fan. So after Sunday's game, he gave me a little shout out on his pod, and that was pretty cool.
That kid, Duncan Robinson, the level of that, how good a shooter that guy is. Like, there's so many guys that are like borderline Larry Bird good, and they're like, I know that guy's known, but I mean, he if he was that good in the fucking 80s, like he'd be on the cover of a cereal box. He'd be the best guy on the fucking team, basically.
What did he say? He said, also, I like how I asked if you'd heard this.
Yeah, I mean, we had already talked about it, so you knew. Yeah. You knew that I had heard it.
I was just kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the shtick. It's kind of what we're doing.
But what did he say? He said, he was talking about how the level of talent in the NBA is just so high that a guy like you who shoots it at the level you do, I think he said borderline Larry Bird or something like that.
Yeah. I think he meant from a shooting standpoint.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it brings up an interesting generational argument that I don't know if we need to fully unpack right now.
Whoa.
But I think we can maybe touch on a little bit if you're willing or wanting to. But like, I think his general point is that the overall talent in the NBA in terms of like, just, I think his point was, I'm not like necessarily a household name, yet I have an ability that
if you were in the 80s, you would have been on a cereal box, I believe is what he said.
That was the quote. And I don't think that I'm not comparing myself to, obviously Larry Bird is like, I have him in my like top 5 damn near of all time. I think it was just more so him acknowledging like how far the league has come from a talent perspective. And that's not to say that those guys in the 80s weren't incredible, because they were. It's just like, it's impossible to compare generations like that.
Right. Agreed. Do you want to get into that?
I actually don't really, just because it's such it's a slippery slope. It's a tricky conversation to have unless you're really going to dive into it.
And the game has changed so much.
Yeah. That's kind of like the baseline that I think everybody needs to like wrap their mind around, is like, there should just be a general appreciation for both. Like if you're going to sit and compare like a role player in the 80s to a role player now, it's like, okay, well, role players in the 80s were asked to do totally different things, and like what was needed and looked for in front offices or, for GMs or coaches just looks totally different. And not to mention today's resources and access and all these things that these kids have growing up nowadays looks totally different. I mean, I even look at something as simple as like, I look at what shoes those guys used to play in.
100%.
Like they're balling in Chuck T's.
Yes.
Like I wear Chuck T's on a Friday night and my feet are sore by the end of it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like and they're going out playing 82 games in Chuck Taylors.
Right.
And dropping triple doubles. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Well, now you need guys who can defend and shoot corner threes. Back then you needed guys who could like get into a fight if you needed them to.
Right.
It sounds like you're trying to beat around the bush of saying players today are just way more skilled, which I think is true.
Well, I think I actually don't think it's just skill. I think it's like athleticism. I think the talent, I think there's actually no denying that the general talent in the NBA is at an all-time high.
Right.
Like the things that guys in the NBA, and this is a generality, like speaking, all encompassing, the things that guys in the NBA are able to do across the board, it's just levels higher than what was capable. And that's not to say that guys were not incredible and the numbers that they put up weren't incredible. Like I'm not here for the, Michael Jordan played against plumbers argument. I don't agree with that. That's not what I'm saying either. Right. Those guys are still world-class athletes in their own respects, but I just think it's different.
Yes. You've got fives now. Yeah. Shooting threes and taking guys off the dribble. And
I think it's funny too when people defending the Michael Jordan playing against plumbers would use, okay, well, this is LeBron's competition. It'd be like a picture of myself.
Yeah.
And like, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, this is who LeBron had to beat to get a ring. That's a humbling meme, just, casually scrolling through social media, in the off season and coming across that one. That's a fun one.
Just you trying to take a charge on LeBron, just like in the fetal position on the floor.
Yeah. It's like, all right, Michael Jordan played plumbers. Well, LeBron played Duncan Robinson.
No, going back to Bill Burr, you're borderline Larry Bird good.
That seems, aggressively strong. I mean, that he's a comedian. He makes a profession off of hyperbole.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
That's like kind of his lane. But anyways, I'm a huge Bill Burr fan. So Bill, if you somehow come across this and want to leave me tickets to a show at some point, I would really appreciate it.
Or come on the pod.
Yeah. You'd be a very, very welcome guest.
He did. He said if you played in the 80s, you'd be on a cereal box, which I think is great. What cereal box are you going on?
Well, I think the angle there was the Wheaties.
Right, that's the easy answer.
Were guys getting put on other cereal boxes besides
I'm just
Wheaties?
asking you if you had your preference.
I mean, my 80s pop culture probably isn't where it needs to be, but I would.
What about today? If you're going on a cereal box,
Honey Bunches of Oats.
Whoa!
Yeah,
shout out Honey Bunches of Oats.
The versatility between it can kind of be like a dessert style cereal, but also like you can justify it a little bit as like somewhat healthy.
Yeah.
I think is the separator. But the staple, the be all end all, will always be original Special K.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, for those of you maybe keeping score at home, I'm a Special K guy through and through. I think it is the hidden gem, the overlooked, whatever you want to call it, of cereals. It'll legitimately never go out of style. Not to bring up Chuck T's again, but it's like the Chuck T of cereals. Like Chuck T's will always be relevant, fashionable, whatever you want to say. I will always be able to eat Special K cereal.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Really. I'm more of a fruit and yogurt guy myself.
Yeah, I mean, why mess with it? Why try to turn a great thing into, you know what I mean? Like it's already great. Like it doesn't need the, additional whatever.
All right.
Frivolous. Anyways.
Keep throwing out some vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's quick. Another tangent for the listeners, because we've just been doing this all episode. Speaking of Special K, if you were to go into Duncan's kitchen right now, well, the stockpile's dwindled, but I think at one point there were probably 80 boxes of Special K.
Honestly, that actually might be
low.
Underselling it. Yeah. So back in the fall, I did like a 10 questions thing, and somebody asked me what my favorite snack was. And it's always been Special K. And somebody at Special K got a hold of that, General Mills or whoever does their stuff.
Yeah.
And about 2 weeks later, I legitimately probably had 100 boxes of Special K.
You're right. It might
like
hit
more
digits.
Special K than anybody knew what to do with. To the point where if I ever had like a friend come over or whatever, I would just give them a Special K on the way out.
Special K was
like a party.
gifts.
Yeah, it was like a party favor.
Yeah. And you were forcing it to people.
Yeah.
No, I don't need it. No, like please take 5 boxes.
Anyways, what else do we got, Dave? You're kind of setting the tempo here. So what are we transitioning?
I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about? We keep going on tangents. I kind of like it.
No, I pretty much.
We're done. Yeah, it feels like we've kind of. Well, let's go to a somewhat of a somber's not the right word.
I don't know where this is going.
Well, we're approaching the playoffs.
Oh, yes.
Which is sort of like, 0 dark 30 lock-in time. So what does that mean for the pod?
Well, yeah, we did want to address this. The pod will be going on a brief hiatus.
Yes.
Basically, this will be we believe it to be our last episode before the playoffs. We might do a very brief kind of little like playoff preview, if you will, just the two of us next week. But I think this will be like the last kind of major episode that we have. Like I said, going to shut it down for the playoffs. Obviously, lock in at my day job, if you will, at the task at hand, and really focus in. So for all those people commenting, let's get in the gym a little more and podcast a little less. I guess you're finally getting your wish. I think that's like a ridiculous.
No. Don't give them that.
Yeah, it's honestly, I was going to say like that's a ridiculous comment in and of itself. It's like the amount of time and energy I put towards my basketball relative to the tiny amount that goes into this podcast. Right. I think JJ actually said it great. Like the same way guys play video games or, watch Netflix or HBO or whatever, or watch movies or do whatever they do, whatever extracurriculars professional athletes may do. This just happens to be mine for whatever it is, an hour a week or so. But yeah, regardless, I think for a variety of reasons, it just makes sense to kind of shut it down and just lock in. Obviously, we have a chance to make a run, I believe. So it just makes sense.
And you're going to be in a series now, which is just great.
Yes.
We don't have to worry about the play-in.
Yeah.
So it just gives you a chance to lock in.
Yeah. So that needed to be addressed. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think we have our our Reddit question of the week, do we? Or was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I mean, I wouldn't have hated a few more tangents, but we've been going for a while, so maybe we.
I got a tangent for you real quick.
Let's do it. Come on.
Davis and I were talking about this earlier.
Uh-oh.
And, I love the Northeast, grew up there. I love the Midwest, spent a lot of time there as well, spent my college years between those two places. And I love seasons. I really do.
Yeah.
I have a general appreciation for spring, fall, beautiful foliage in the Northeast. I think the number one most underrated, talking about long shots here, aspect of living in Miami is that you never get chapped lips. I took a long weekend trip to Boston, obviously, this past weekend. And by day 2, and it's nice weather. It's not even like frigid up there. It's like 55-ish. It's like still pretty nice. But having to adjust from like the humidity down here, my skin just dries out. And my lips are just like chapped. Now, we fly in last night. When I get on the plane in Boston, my lips are like kind of chapped. We land. By the time I wake up this morning, no more chapped lips.
You're back to just a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, and it's just the humidity. Now, a lot of people look at humidity and say, "Oh, it's so terrible. My hair is frizzy. I feel like I'm always sweating. I feel, all this stuff."
All true.
All somewhat true.
No, true.
But don't take for granted that you will never get chapped lips in Miami. Maybe not never, but very rarely are you going to get chapped lips living in Miami. And for me, that's just a huge plus.
You don't really sweat just like throughout your day. I'm a sweater.
This feels like this is going to a weird place. I just wanted to acknowledge.
Hey, you brought up a tangent, buddy. Now we're here. I sweat. So for all my sweaters out there,
okay,
I can't do. That's why Miami, especially right now, like it's 84 degrees right now, which we're dressed like it's winter, by the way. But that's because you keep your apartment at like 65 degrees.
Yeah, I like it chilly.
I just sweat. Like yesterday, I walked to go get lunch. I went to Target afterwards, and by the time I get home, I'm just sweating. It's like, oh, I need a new shirt now. Which is so no chapped lips is great, sure, but I don't know if that's
hugely underrated.
I don't think that's enough of a benefit.
Chapped lips is a major nuisance, and the other thing about chapped lips, chapstick doesn't actually work. There's There's like 2 brands of chapstick that actually cure chapped lips.
Shards of glass in there that actually cut you up.
All chapstick does is just make your lips need more chapstick.
Yeah.
It's all it does.
The right ones.
There's only like 2 or 3 brands that actually like cure chapped lips.
I'm not shouting them out. They're going to have to pay for
it. Yeah. No free promos on this podcast.
All right,
let's move forward. We've dedicated 5 minutes to chapped lips.
I just think it's absurd that we're putting non-chapped lips as a higher importance than just not sweating. Like, to me, that's so.
I'm just saying it's an underrated aspect of living in Miami. That's all. Take it at face value. I also want to point out, clearly, there are things that have been left on the cutting board throughout the first 18 episodes that now, as we're on the brink of going on this hiatus, we feel that we need to talk about. So that's why this conversation has gone in this kind of convoluted, strange direction.
Yeah. Okay, fine. Fair enough.